remember that I think we were recording the Asylum episode, and we realized while we were just talking that we skipped the originals. So I promised at that time that we would talk about it in a bonus episode. So tell me about this compilatory release that was the original, that it was a big package that had all three first albums Kiss ever put out, which was the original, then Harder Than Hell, and then Dressed to Kill. So talk about a little bit about the originals.
That was one of those jobs that when it came through, it was kind of like not a new release, it was just a repackaging. I kind of like the Killers, Kiss Killers, just a extra job that came through. It didn't really require, I don't think, super new high concept solution. It's just I had to just say what it was and be attractive, and that's it. I don't know why we did that bomb on the cover. It's lost in my memory for some reason. But the only thing I do recall is that at one point, and maybe it was for this, I don't know, but they were talking about naming their next album. They were going to name it Bomb.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you ever consider just using a photo of the band, a current photo of the band from May of 1976, just in their Destroyer costumes?
For the originals?
Yeah.
No, because it was a compilation of 3 different records, 3 different eras. I thought it had to be more kind of generic, not specific. Just some image, but not them, not specific. But why the big bomb? Well, because wow, I don't know what that's supposed to connote. Like, so they are so explosive. They are so.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I can't quite pin down where that idea came from. I do remember going to the stock photo agency and asking for pictures of atom bomb explosions and sitting there and going through countless pictures. Maybe not just atom bomb, but any kind of explosions. And I was looking at transparencies and slides, and big transparencies and little slides. And I thought I was going to go blind. I was there for hours. Light box, magnifying glass. Finally picked this one. I'll tell you something interesting about this. When I was superimposing their faces onto the bomb.
Yeah.
You see Gene's face?
Yeah.
You see the fire coming out of his mouth?
Oh, wow. Yes.
Pure serendipity.
Wow.
I was moving the Kiss image around with light box and transparencies over the atom bomb picture. And I said, holy shit, if I put it right here, it looks like fire's coming out of Gene's mouth. And that's what happened. Wow. No retouching, no manipulation.
What process did you use to overimpose the 2 photos?
Well, that was done, I guess you could say, post-production. I took their photo. I stuck a photostat of the explosion down, black and white, on my mechanical board, for size and cropping, We explained that one previous episode, how I'd make mechanicals and how we have to set up a paste up for the printer. It's separate things. You have artwork here, which is the color work and the transparency and the photograph. And then you have this mechanical, which is all done with black and white photostats, which are done to size. They're cropped exactly. All the type goes on there. And then on an overlay, you write all your instructions. This is white, this is red, this is, blah, 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 blah. So I had my bomb photo stuck down on the board. And then I had a black and white photo of the guys, like it is on their, like it shows on there, to size. And I moved that around until I knew it was in the right spot on the bomb. But I wanted those 2 photos to be melted together, superimposed. And I got the printer in before I even sent it to him because I wanted to get some production advice from him. I said, you know what I'm after here? I want you to take that. The 2 images have to be combined photomechanically. And I want the image of the band to be kind of monochromatic and about maybe 50% of its intensity so that it lays back, He says, got it. He understood. I had a good printer. He was excellent. Helped out on a lot of these little problems, And then he would show me stuff, interim pieces before he went and made plates and all the expense of getting the job ready to print. They made things they call 3Ms, the same people who make Scotch tape, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, 3Ms. there's a process that we all used, all art directors used, all agencies and graphic design studios used. It was a way to see what your job was going to look like before it was printed. So they would have it photomechanically separated onto layers and cyan, magenta, black, and yellow on separate acetates. And then they combined, registered, and you could see how it looks. But if it looks too red, you could remove the red one and look at it without the red, and et cetera, et cetera. And that was called a 3M. So he gave me a 3M of this, and I could see how it was going to look. And that was the time when you could make those fixes and those adjustments. You would get a 3M. Wish I had one to show you, but I don't. Because it's a good tool to visualize your job before it gets printed. It's not perfect, but you get a pretty good idea. As far as the cover goes, that's it. We did a nice booklet on the inside.
Did you pick all the goodies that come inside? I mean, did you decide? Because he has a lot of things inside. He has a little booklet that is in sepia tone. And he has
we tried to give it a vintage look because it was, looking back in their recording history all the way back 3 years.
Oh, okay. So it was like an old photo album.
Yeah. Just to give it a nostalgic look.
Okay.
Little vintage, little.
I see. And who came up with the information on those little cards? Remember that he had information about each member of the band?
I barely remember it. I wish I had a copy of the originals here. I didn't keep anything. The only thing I really remember about the booklet is the cover now. Concert, Hotel Diplomat. So I had that copy of that original flyer that they used to walk around town and hang them up, So what I did was we made a copy of it, and I went outside, I stuck it on, I think it's a firebox that you find on the corners of New York where you pull the handle and call the fire department,
That's a great cover. Very tasty.
Yeah, we've made a vignette. I remember that now. So I designed the Rocksteady logo.
You did?
Yeah. Vinny designed O'Coin's logo, and Casablanca logo was done by not us.
It's a great logo, the Casablanca logo.
Casablanca logo, I'm wondering if David Bird did it.
Then that's part of the booklet.
I wonder if Peggy wrote that. Oh, we should call Peggy. And these are period correct, right, for the 3 albums, I guess?
Yeah, they are. Then you got a lot of sepia you used to make it look aged.
What does that say up there? Is that the invitation? Oh, there you go. Honor Kiss, the triumphant return and conquest of the Motor City, 1975, immediately following Cobo Hall performance. All right. Interesting.
Yeah, that's very classy. I love the design. And look at all the goodies it has. It's great.
That's a pretty good package, huh?
It is. And you made it classy by adding a little rim to the sleeves of the album covers, like a frame to each sleeve for the album covers.
Yeah. In other words, they've been reprinted, but they're paper sleeves, not cardboard.
Exactly, because
we couldn't put cardboard. It would have been a big fat thing,
Yeah, they're paper.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I forgot.
But now I kind of want it.
It was only 50 years ago.
No, it's very expensive because I don't think they produced a lot of them. It was a short run.
Yeah, I wish I had a good copy, but I don't. You never know. Maybe I do.
Yesterday, I was looking at Ken's book.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I always forget. I wrote the foreword or the introduction.
You did.
I always
wrote the foreword. Yeah, forward by Dennis Woloch. Here
it is. It was nice of him.
Yeah, look at that. And he has
and Bill O'Coin.
And he has that photo of you guys there. Look at that.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah.
So he said something really interesting about Destroyer. And you know what? It doesn't talk about Destroyer. It only talks about Love Gun in the book. Oh. And I think he was planning to do another book. He said, we'll talk about Destroyer the next time. What next time? What next time? This is the only book. So, well, basically he said that the album cover was rejected because it was too violent, that he had nothing to do with the costumes. And then he says, and also they have different costumes. So I took the opportunity to do a new one. But he said the reason as to do a new one was the first one was too violent.
Well, I guess that was talked about But I think what happened was, since we're doing a new one, tone down the violence. I don't think it was the reason number one.
Right. And he also goes to say that he doesn't know what that original brown painting is today, which throws out the window my theory that he drew on top of the brown one to produce the blue one. I had that theory for a while, that the reason no one has seen that original brown one is because he painted it over. But you said, no, that's impossible. It was a separate painting.
It would have been more work, actually. It would have been easier for him to do a new one.
Right. He says that Gene probably owns the brown one, that he has it.
Oh, the brown one? Yeah, that could be, I guess. I don't know.
That's what
no knowledge.
That's what Ken says in his book, that Gene probably owns it.
Ken says a lot of things in interviews that make me shake my head.
Yeah, he actually says something interesting here, like you were sent in an assignment. The way he phrased it is kind of interesting. Remember, you told me that you were lost and you were going around Manhattan on your own, but apparently Ken thinks you were sent by your boss in Manhattan to look for an artist.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he says things like that. Yeah.
Right? He says
no, they had nothing to do with nothing, believe me.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. And then he'll say things like, somebody asked him whose idea was it, the original idea or something, and he went, probably Peter Criss. What? What the hell are you talking about? Really crazy shit like that.
Wow.
I called him on it one time because he said, and then I went to New York. Talking about the destroyer thing.
Yeah.
We called in on the job. And I went to the record company. Well, it was the advertising agency, not the record company. But that's okay. That's forgivable. He doesn't know, And there was limousines all outside. No. And I went up into the offices. The walls were all black. Well, the walls in our office were white.
Well, you know what? One of the things he mentions in his book, that he was right out of the military service when he started painting for these horror magazines. So he says that the Kiss world, your world, the world of advertising and rock band was so far removed from he was accustomed to, that, you know what? It's not hard for me to believe that everything he saw in the office was not just, wow, what is this? Is another world?
Now, I know I said, here's one of the mistakes that I made. But at least I didn't swear to it. I said probably, I think. But I thought that Ken was quite recently out of the Marines.
Yeah.
When he came to me and met me. That's not true. It's not? Not true. He'd been out for years.
That's what he said that's what he says in the book, that he was just out of this.
I saw a timeline somewhere recently. He was out for years.
Oh.
He mentioned when he was in the Marines, what the years were, and all of that stuff. And it was like nowhere near Destroyer's cover. So, and I said, shit, I misled everybody. But
wow.
Anyway, black walls. We had black walls, and
maybe that was his perception. He came from a different type of world.
I said to him in one of these, I think it was at a convention. I said, Ken, you didn't have any black walls, you had white wall. There's no limousines outside. I said, whatever you, and he got flustered and he said, oh, it was 40 years ago. I can't remember.
Oh my God. So yesterday, somebody reached out to me and brought to my attention an auction in Heritage Auction. And I get emails like this every now and then. And most of the time it's just somebody asking a question about some things in history. And but this was something that I've never seen before. I was shocked. It was very surprising. I never thought I would see this, but apparently it just happened. So the two original paintings, not sketches, finished, fleshed out, completely delivered paintings of Brown Destroyer and Blue Destroyer got listed at Heritage Auctions. The first thing that caught my eye about them is that they're both rectangles. They both include the back of what was the Destroyer album. Same goes for Destroyer Resurrected, which is known as the Brown painting, which we discussed in our original episode. But when I asked you about if the painting was a rectangle or a square, you said that the back was painted later by Ken. And I think now we should rectify it and say you might have confused the making of Destroyer with the making of Love Gun, which has a separate painting for the back. So can you, do you want to elaborate on all of this?
No. Well, I did. I misremembered.
Mm-hmm.
I thought my memory, which is probably incorrect now, but what I thought I remembered was that when he just delivered Destroyer to me, the real one, the blue one, that it was just a square. He was a little bit late in delivering it, so he brought a little jar of varnish and a brush, and he asked me to put the varnish on.
Yeah, we talked about it in that particular episode.
Right,
as
and
well.
I thought that was crazy, but I said okay, and I did that. I did not remember it being a big horizontal with the back cover also painted on it. I remembered a square, and then I thought I said, Ken, I have a back cover to design, and I would love it to look like it was more of that background that the four guys are on, but without them, just the burning city and the rest of it and the tumultuous sky. So that's what I remembered, two separate pieces. But as it turns out, and I'm looking at this thing that's up for auction, which we have more to say about that too, by the way, but there it is. It's one piece. So I must have requested the continuation of that originally when he first did the job so that I could have a back cover. Mm-hmm. And so it's, and there it is. And there's the proof of it, because there's no doubt that that's the original painting and it's all one piece. So, and then you said to me, is it possible that you confused Love Gun coming in two pieces and not one piece? And, I thought about it just for a second. I said, yes, of course, it is possible. It is possible.
Plus, there is the fact that fans will say, oh, well, there's like 3 album covers between Love Gun and Destroyer and Love Gun. But it was also the lapse of a year.
It's very close. Very close. Yeah. Yeah, they were knocking them out.
They were releasing 2 albums a year. Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over both came out in 1976.
And between touring and everything else, they were busy guys.
And you were busy too. Kiss was not your only client.
Yeah, I was the creative director for an ad agency. We had other clients. Mm-hmm. And I was busy beyond busy, yeah. I was the guy, like if you saw a guy with 2 telephones, at the same time.
Right.
Here, talk to each other,
So the other thing we discussed back then was I asked you what happened to the original Destroyer painting. And you said that you got lost while Bill O'Coin was moving out of his apartment in Manhattan.
That was the story I heard. And it was taken as true because we never saw it again.
Right.
It never popped up. I never talked to Bill about it, but it seemed like he was negligent, very negligent, and didn't really take good care of that art. Mm-hmm. Maybe he just didn't value it as much as some of us do, although I find that difficult to believe. But also at the time, Bill was having some substance problems, I think. And forgive me, Bill in heaven, but he was doing the cocaine and maybe other things. I don't know. But he was a little bit messed up. Mm. Even the Kiss guys knew that.
What year was this, you think, was all this happening? Early 80s? Like 1981, 82, just at about the time they fired him?
Yeah, just before they fired him, because they saw that he was compromised. His behavior wasn't normal. He was not paying attention to them as much as they thought that he should be, on and on. I mean, he wasn't into it as deeply and as lovingly as he was in the beginning. And things change. Let's face it, things change.
Right.
So not only his addiction, but other things changed. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was quite possible. He's moving, and I heard that the destroyer art got thrown out in the trash by mistake. And I just wanted to cry because it's a beautiful piece of art. And it certainly is historic, not only for Kiss, but it became an iconic piece of art for an iconic album. So, it's gone because of negligence and just a shame. And now it popped up on an auction, and I can't believe it, but we're looking at it, and it's the real deal.
It's a real deal.
It's got little scratches on it and damage, which even makes it more believable.
Right. And I compared them. At detail. I scrutinized them. They are the real deal.
You cannot deny that.
And they both match. They look, the composition. They both look the same. The brown and the blue one.
Yeah, that's sort of a curiosity to me, but yeah, I don't know how. It's hard to do.
Yeah, no, he was. Ken was great. But I went to the auction website and I downloaded the images they have there, which they have pretty decent quality. So you can zoom in and see some detail. The quality is good. The first thing I noticed was the hue was all wrong. They had a lot of yellow, which I'm thinking is a result of the light they used when they took the photo. The light temperature was wrong. So I did a little correction of the colors to make it look like the original Destroyer album sleeve, which I'm assuming, since you had the original painting at hand in that particular week when you ordered the sleeves from the printing company, you had the original painting as reference, so you knew what the colors were. So these are the original colors of the painting. This is how it looked like. Absolutely, right?
Absolutely.
You had the original by your side on your desk, so you can see the print proofs that the printing company was sending you. So you made it look as close as possible to the original painting.
That's right. The first thing you do when you have a piece of art, flat art like the painting is, I sent it out to a company that can copy it photographically, and they use the big 8x10 view camera, and they shoot it on color transparency film. In other words, it's color positive, like a slide, but big. They're super professionals. They light it correctly. They use filters to keep little highlights and artifacts to a minimum or make them disappear. As you know, the lights are set at a 45-degree angle. It cancels out little highlights and bumps and junk. And I get these 8x10 transparencies, put them on a light box, and they were, for the most part, what they do is they adjust the exposure to make sure they get the right one. So the exposure is, first they determine what the correct exposure is.
They had what he called a gray card, which give you 50% gray.
Yep, that's right. And they set the exposure accordingly. And then they go a quarter of a stop, and I mean a quarter of a stop, not a full stop, and a quarter of a stop underexposed and over. And they do that a few times this way and that way. And then when I get them to transparencies, they give me, I'll say 6 transparencies. And I look at them, and they usually will put a mark on the one that they feel is dead on, so that the stupid art director doesn't pick the wrong one,
Right.
In my case, I would have picked the right one. I sit there with a loop. I look at it very carefully, and it's perfect. It's a perfect shot of the artwork. There's no changes in color. It's good. It's really good. But now, there's more steps to this. Then it has to go to the printer. They take that transparency. This is what they're working from now. They don't work from the painting anymore. They work from the transparency, and they color separate it for 4-color printing. All artwork has to be separated into 4 colors. You know that. And we went through this before, I think. And in a way, they do something similar when it's digital, but there's no photographic. But They still, if you produce a piece of full color digital art like you do very often, I mean, when you hand work in to the printer or to your client, you give them a digital file.
Yeah.
You don't give them a piece of paper, but they take that digital file and then they separate it digitally or, computer-wise.
That is called pre-press.
A pre-press, right? All the pre-press work. So pre-production, pre-press. So when they do it from a transparency, they put it into a photographic process, and by using filters, they can separate the cyan blue, the magenta red, yellow, and black, and they get that. So what I'm getting at is a lot of things can still go wrong color-wise.
Right.
Even though we were very, very, very careful in giving them a perfect transparency, That doesn't mean what comes out at the end of that printing press is going to be perfect. It could be really off. And a lot of times,
somebody could still put a few more drops of magenta in the container, right?
yeah, it just depends on how that camera worked, who the operator was. Did he have the settings correct? Did he take care? Did he do it a couple of times instead of just one? A lot of times, look, they're working. These guys are working. It's almost like a factory, right? So they go in there and it's like bang, bang, bang. Right. Let me get the magenta separated. Okay, next, let me get the cyan separated. And they just do it, boom, boom, boom. And they get their 4 pieces of film. And from that, they make their 4 plates. The plates go on the press. The ink goes in the press. And then they turn it on and out it comes the other end. And then they adjust. The presses were pretty sophisticated. So they press buttons. More magenta, less magenta, more yellow, and they balance. And you can see them as they're getting the press running for the run and they're trying to get the colors right.
Calibrating it.
Yeah, they're working all these buttons. And the guy's looking and he's going up, 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 like up, 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 minus, minus, plus, 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 plus. And they're looking at the stuff coming off. And then they finally get it where they think it's good. And then they call me over and I look at it and I go, yes, no, But so many things can go wrong. On Rock and Roll Over, I give you a big story, and I stopped the presses. I stopped them.
Because it didn't look right.
Didn't look right. They wanted to shoot me. You don't stop the presses. You just don't do that. That thing is a gazillion-dollar machine. You got all these people making lots of money. They keep those presses running 24 hours a day. When Kiss is done, off it comes and on goes Meatloaf. Yeah, and then they're printing Meatloaf, and then they're printing somebody else. They don't stop. So when I stop the press, it screws up their schedule. They were mad. But the pressman, I explained to him, and it took me. I don't want to get into Rock and Roll Over now, but I pointed out to him what I thought was wrong.
No, I remember that was a great story.
Yeah,
that was a great story.
Yeah, right.
So going back to this auction, we discussed the blue album cover, which is the one most people know, and we concluded that it's the same painting, the same deal. Same goes for the brown cover. Now, there's a few things I want to point out to you before we get into the meat of it. This is where things get into the twilight zone, get weird and inexplicable. Muy extraño. All right. First of all, I have never seen, and I don't think you have seen since then, the original brown painting. This is the first time I ever see the original brown painting. Okay, in its full fleshed out rectangle, including the back.
I'll tell you something. It might be the first time I'm seeing it. I mean,
wow. Okay.
I don't remember too much about the brown painting.
So, yeah, and you said that in the original episode of Destroyer that you didn't remember it well, and you didn't know what happened to it over the years. We speculated, oh, Gene might have it, but we don't know. I heard Gene might have it. So who's the person who had these paintings since the early 80s?
The only thing I remember about that part of the job, it was the original try from Ken. And the only thing that struck me when I first looked at it was, oh, shit, it's brown. I went through a detailed explanation of the painting and how I wanted it to look, how the guy should be posed, what's going on in the background, over and over and over again. But I never said anything about the general overall look of color-wise. But that's Ken's palette. He likes that
I know.
brown orange look. But that didn't occur to me when I was giving him instructions. Mm-hmm. So when I got the painting, I was a little disappointed, not in his skill and the quality of the painting. It was just the color. I didn't want to have a brown thing, but I wasn't going to reject it for that. But I did say it to Ken. But in a way, a good thing happened. He had to redo it because of their costumes. And they said the costumes changed. Now, he probably would have worked on the brown painting and changed the costumes if that's all that he had to do. But maybe, because I think he could do that. But what I said, Ken, since you have to do this over again, can you make the main color scheme in the blue range? I want it to look cooler, not warm and brown like that. And he grumbled. But he did it, and he did it great.
No, I think you made the right decision. It gives a lot more dynamic to it because you have the orange red logo on the top, which looks great over the blue sky.
Yes, and the flames of the burning city and that little stuff, and it makes a difference.
Yes.
So
anyway, so who do you think had these two paintings hidden in some warehouse or some storage unit since 1982?
Kiss did have a storage unit. Once they sued my boss, he stupidly let them take all the files, which he shouldn't have done, but he did. And they stored everything away in the warehouse. So when they subsequently needed work after the agency was out of the picture, me and the whole agency, and they kind of went independent, they would just go into the warehouse and look for stuff and find art and things and use it. They did that for a while. So Kiss had their own. But
eventually, Bill O'Coin lost at least one of those storage units. Remember that went into auction, and then some of the costumes showed up in a convention in the 90s.
He failed to pay the rent.
So So is it logical or reasonable to assume that these paintings were among some of those items, or do you think somebody inherited from Bill O'Coin?
Well. The short answer is I don't know, but I could speculate. If he had more than one storage unit, it could have been not in the one that was seized because he didn't pay the rent. Richie Rano?
No. Who's that?
Lead guitar player for Stars.
Okay.
And Richie's a good friend of mine. Richie, as far as I know, started this whole Kiss convention thing.
Oh yeah, was he the one who put that convention in, the one with the costumes?
It may have been because Richie bought the contents of that storage unit that Kiss no longer owned. So he had it, all that stuff. So he said, what am I going to do with this shit? I'll sell it. And he made a convention and blah, blah, blah. That was, that's how it started. So if that painting was amongst everything else, maybe,
Looking at this original, the brown original, the first thing I noticed that Ace's face is completely different than the one we saw on Destroyer Resurrected, which came out in 2011, 2012. Mind you, at that time, when this album came out, I've never seen this before. Kiss, they showed the original sketch, which was a much rougher version of this brown painting. It was a sketch. They showed it on one of their home videos dating from 1994. And this guy, the guy who sent me this auction, said that sketch was sold on another auction in the early 2000s, like more than 20 years ago. So to put out this album, Destroyer Resurrected, they took this from a slide. It's the only possible explanation. Because if the original is now showing on an auction, they didn't have the original paintings. This, Destroyer Resurrected, came from a slide, one of those big format slides you were just talking about. Is that reasonable to assume?
Yes, it is. The only little tidbit I can add to this is that, Ken didn't do little oil painting sketches for me to look at for approval before the final painting.
No, but there's one of Destroyer. It's a sketch.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it was part of the process between me and Ken. So I think Ken did these things after the fact to sell them.
So how come Kiss in 1994 were showing this sketch, saying this is the original sketch of Destroyer? Have you seen that video? No. But
let me tell you something. They don't know.
Okay.
They're full of shit. In other words, they have no idea what went on. This is the original.
The guy who, like I said, I was talking through email with, who was interested in buying these two paintings, mentioned that particular sketch was sold in an auction more than 20 years ago.
It's entirely possible because after he completed the finished painting, he just went back to his studio and started making little paintings that he could sell. Did you ever meet Ken at a Kiss convention?
I did. I met him in Miami.
Did you look at his table?
Yeah, I did.
Full of Destroyer drawings and things.
Yeah, he had Destroyer pencil drawing, black and white.
Right, and he actually did some paintings that were a little more finished, and he sold them for a lot more money. And he just continued to reproduce it because he saw a way to make money, and then he did. And he did make money, made plenty.
To me, this is all very puzzling. And going back to Ace's face, I don't understand why, if they had a high quality photo of the original Brown painting, why do you think they would change Ace's face for Destroyer Resurrected and made it worse? It looks like a, I don't know, inbred or something.
But isn't that the first one? And then the second one was improved? Isn't that the first one that was the mistake?
I have no idea. What do you mean the mistake? What do you mean
because he's ugly. He's ugly. He's a horrible face. It's like a mistake. It's not.
This can be the first one of anything, because I compared it with the one in the auction site, and everything, every brush strokes is the same except Ace's face.
So he did this one with the bad face. It was photographed, and then somehow, somewhere along the line, it was given back to Ken to change his face to make it better. No?
I don't. Are you guessing, or
I had nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. The Brown thing, what left my whole experience once it got rejected as an album cover, which was right away. As soon as he delivered it, they said, we have to change it because of the costumes.
Okay.
I don't know, but we couldn't live with that face.
Yeah. To me, this is puzzling. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what the explanation for it.
It is. And if you ask Ken, you might get the, if he was still with us, you might get the right, accurate answer. But then again, you might not. You might not, because he forgot stuff too.
Now, there's another slight difference that is worth mentioning, is the two lightning bolts in Ace's chest in his costume are also different. The one in the auction site, they're longer. They're almost touching each other in the center. And the ones in the Destroyer Resurrected sleeve, they're just different, shorter. So I don't know what that is about. If it was part of the same retouching Ken did, or if this was all done by somebody else who put this album out. I don't know. It's very strange.
I don't know, but it's pretty skillfully done. So you might think it was Ken, but then again, who knows? I mean.
All right. The last major difference, and which makes me doubt of the authenticity of some of this, is the signature. The signature looks nothing like Ken's signature. It seems like somebody else did this just to state that this was done in 1975, like a statement. Hey, look, it was done in 1975.
Yeah, I looked at that, and that is curious. The one thing I can say about it is when I was trying to contact Ken before I met him, when I bought the creepy magazine comic book, which is what made me want to meet Ken and see if he could do this album cover for me. So I'm trying to identify the artist. I looked inside the comic where they give credits and stuff, and I didn't see anything cover painting by who or who. I don't remember seeing that there.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the signature.
And it doesn't read Ken Kelly.
I can't read it. I can't really read it. I think I saw Ken, but the last name, I don't know. It makes that K so weird. So I said, okay, I got to call the publisher or the art director over there, which is what I did. And then that's how I found Ken. So the point I'm making is that that's a terrible signature. And I think maybe Ken got the word that, it might be smart if I could sign it where people could see my name and identify me, and maybe I'll get some future work out of that. Otherwise, they don't know who the hell I am. So that's possible that Ken himself went back and changed the signature.
Yeah, but okay. But I've seen other paintings of Ken of this particular time when this came out, like 2009, 2010. And it's the old one. Yeah. I think this signature is a fake. I don't think it was.
I mean, Claudio, it really could be. I'm just looking for another explanation.
It's crazy. Now,
the explanation, being that the signature sucked and that it should be changed.
Now, there's another fact that is worth discussing. And that is the fact that for Destroyer Resurrected, they used the blue back, not the original brown back.
Turn that around again. Let me see the front. Oh, that's crazy.
Look,
I didn't know that.
Destroyer Resurrected.
I had no idea.
The back is the original Destroyer blue, not the brown.
See, it was two separate paintings. And they lost the back cover and they had to use the other cover. Aha!
Yes, Dennis, that's exactly what it is. No, the brown painting had his own back, and we can see it in the auction.
No,
now the question is, why Kiss doesn't have the back of the original brown? Because they don't have it. If they had the original painting, they would have make a beautiful scan, retouch it. I could repair that. All those scratches can be erased with Photoshop. I can do a perfect restoration of that.
So they use the transparency.
They use the transparency.
Back to your original thought, yeah.
They use
that was probably in the files, by the way, in Kiss's files.
Yes.
The transparency would definitely have been in Kiss's files.
Right.
Not necessarily the original painting.
So the original brown got as far of the reproduction, the transparency process. It got to that step.
I could have had it copied just for safety, just to have it, Not necessarily we're ever going to use it, but I think I'd better take a picture of this.
Plus, you always said that you needed more material for advertising and promotion.
Well,
and having another painting on the file, might come in handy, right?
Might come in handy.
Yeah.
Might come in handy.
Yeah. So those are all the major differences of this puzzle, this mystery, because it's really a mystery. There's a lot of questions and lots of theories, but we don't know. I can say, with a certain amount of certainty, that I don't think Kiss have neither of these two paintings, and the person who's selling them is not Gene and Paul.
Right, and any reproductions that were done without, me or whatever, were probably done from slides, not slides, but transparency, that were in the files that they got after the lawsuit.
Is there anything else you want to add to this?
Not really, except that I spoke to Peggy Tamarkin,
okay,
our writer of the time. I spoke to her yesterday. And I hadn't talked to Peggy in years, but I got her phone number I had her phone number and I called it and she was happy to hear from me. We talked about who people were always taking credit for shit that they didn't necessarily do. And she said Howard Marks took credit for the idea for Unmasked, that it should be a comic strip. And she said, I thought that was my idea. And I said, I think you're right, Peggy. I think it was your idea. And, she kind of reminded me that we did an ad in one of the magazines, and it was a comic strip ad, and it was done in black and white drawings by Ken Kelly, and it was for Destroyer, I think, or something. I don't know. And it was done in a comic strip style, and then from that we evolved to do Unmasked later in comic strip. So I don't know if you're ever interested in some other minutia about that. Peggy might be the one to call and ask. She'd probably love to talk to you. The only thing I got from talking to Peggy was that she's real hazy on a lot of stuff.
Oh, I see.
She forgets big things,
wow.
Not just minutia. So, but she might clear up some stuff.
Cool.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
I'll reach. Do you think she would know things like this? Like if Bill would lost the paintings, really moving out of his apartment and stuff like that.
Unless she heard some different story that I heard, maybe. But
okay.
But actually know stuff, I don't know. I doubt it. But
so, like we promised, this is going to be a bonus episode. So throughout the releasing of the show, throughout the last 3 years, a few fans have pointed out some valid points about myths or certain things that we didn't discuss enough, or we didn't touch enough on those subjects, or just plain dismissed. The first one is Rock and Roll Over. There is a famous pressing that is known as the blue tear pressing. This myth has been going on forever. It's basically a Rock and Roll Over in which Paul has a little blue tear on his left cheek. And this originated all kinds of legends and conspiracy theories and speculations. I thought that we should put all of those legends to rest and come up with an explanation for that particular blue tier in that rock and roll over, which is, by the way, very expensive on eBay, boys.
Yeah. Wow. Well, the reason that I put the blue tier on Paul's eye.
Good one.
I'll get somebody talking. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we explained briefly, and I mean, just, in one sentence, the blue tier is a printing anomaly. It was a mistake in the press. Something got on the plate or the rubber mat, and a little piece of dirt, whatever, on the blue plate. And it, if you look at it, it kind of looks like a tear.
It's a pretty remarkable coincidence anomaly,
that it happened right by his eye, that it happened in the blue color, instead of red, which would have been a little more obvious mistake, let's say. But it was blue, so it's like water, like I think you alluded to before, and maybe something that was said. If you wanted to make it look like a tear, you could have drawn it a little bit better.
Right. Well, that's what Michael said. Actually, somebody asked Michael about this in some chat board about 15 years ago. Not recently. This is from 2010, something like that.
And this is Michael Doret.
This is Michael's response about the blue tier in Rock and Roll Over. So, first of all, I can tell you that what you have in your photo is an inferior printing of the cover because there should be an impression of silver ink in certain areas. And I can see that one of those areas that appears in your photo, Paul's eyelid specifically, is printed in black halftone instead. And then he continues, as far as those controversial tiers are concerned, I'm sorry to burst everyone's bubble, but what you're looking at is just a flaw in the printing. There must have been something on the blue printing plate, perhaps some dried ink or whatever, to have caused that anomaly. I've seen similar printing mistakes many, many times. If someone had actually intended to draw tiers, they couldn't have done a worse job than that. End quote.
Yeah, our minds are programmed to see patterns and certain things, especially faces. I mean, you want to see a face in almost any kind of odd pattern. You can see a face, and people still looking at a picture of Mars, and it looks like a giant statue that's a face. There's two eyes and lips. I mean, it does look like a face, but it's just random bumps in the terrain, and when the shadow of the sun and whatever, and it's creating something that looks like a face. A half an hour later, when the shadows move, it's no longer a face.
Yeah, it's the same thing with, apparitions and miracles fall in that category sometimes.
We want to see what we want to see, and the mind really is geared to see certain things. So there, anyway, it's not tears.
So that's put to rest all the myths about the rock and roll team. It won't put the price down, though. I'm sure it's still going to cost a few hundreds of dollars on eBay. So if anybody who's watching this is the lucky owner of a blue tier rock and roll over edition, just go to Discogs or eBay and see how much it is. So there's one thing that caught my eye in Michael's statement. He says, first of all, I can tell you that what you have in that photo is an inferior printing because there should be an impression of silver ink in certain areas. Basically, all the gray areas, it was supposed to be silver PMS or Pantone, silver ink. Michael says is a black halftone pattern instead. So Michael said that this cover was done in the chip because it was done in a 4-color process. So what did he mean by that?
Well, what he meant was the original, the way I prepared it, the way I asked Michael to prepare it, and the way Michael did prepare it, was not for 4-color separation printing in dots. We did it for flat colors. Flat. And there were 6 of them, not 4. So we put it on a 6-color press. This job was expensive, and it was really kind of state-of-the-art stuff. We were really after high quality. So he prepared the art for that kind of printing. And yes, indeed, the first run was done that way. Beautiful. What happened subsequently, I can only guess because I was not in charge. But, second and third and fourth printings, and this happened with other album covers too, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But whoever got a hold of it did not go back to the original plates, the original film that was made to make those plates, which they could have. But they didn't want to put it on a 6-color press. It's expensive. They thought it was probably ridiculous that we did that. These guys, they don't care. So what they did was they took an album cover.
Probably, yes.
And they shot it and separated it 4-color process like I had explained before.
Which immediately will take down the quality by 3 or 4 points. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And now it's all dots.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you could help it. You could manipulate it. You could retouch the film a little bit so that it's not so dotty. And there are things you can do. But still, it's a terrible compromise.
I know. Well, I actually did the exercise of checking all my rock and roll overs, and I texted all my friends who are vinyl collectors to check their own rock and roll overs, and I got a few responses. My friend Fabian just responded to me just a while ago, and he has an original pressing pressed in New York, not necessarily a first pressing, but a pressing from 1976, maybe a couple of months after the first pressing.
Maybe they saw that they were going to sell some and they had to print it again. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it is, ladies and gentlemen, it is 4-color pressed, not Pantone, not PMS. So I went to my vinyls, and I have 3. Check this out. One is an original 1978 Chilean pressing. The second one, which is the priciest one, is a Japanese original 1976 a Japanese pressing, which is gatefold. He has a night photo inside the gatefold, a live photo.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you what the gatefold has inside.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. See, that's after the fact, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
But
pretty nice. I never saw that.
Yeah, but Japanese pressings have the reputation of being some of the pressings in the world in terms of sound quality, the what you get for your money, how good and nice the packages are.
Like
you know what I mean?
With the gatefold, those. Nice.
Yeah, and they include a lyric sheet in Japanese. Look at that, with the songs translated to Japanese.
All right.
With that little thing Michael designed as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I looked all 3 with a magnifier. Both the Japanese and the Chilean editions from the 70s are 4-color process. The only one that is Pantone code coloring is the new one. For all the people watching this, just grab a magnifier and look at Rock and Roll Over. If you see dots, little dots, it means it was done in 4-color process. But if you see
done after the original printing,
right? So if you see a solid color, I mean totally solid, no dots, nothing, just a flat color, then you have a first pressing, and it should be
right.
Much
and
more
it makes
valuable.
sense, Claudio, that any other printing that after the one that I did, the original printing, it makes sense that they would be 4-color process. They didn't have access to the original separated film. They didn't have access to the original art that Michael prepared. Michael did it by hand. He did black shapes on clear acetate film. But if that wasn't available to them, they just shot the album cover and made a new one. So
yeah, we talked at length about that in the original Rock and Roll Over episode, and I kind of did a reenactment of the original films for people to understand. So, I thought that was very interesting that some copies of Rock and Roll Over are actual flat colors, and some others are 4-color process.
Yeah, but the flat colors were from 1976, right?
And the 4-color ones as well, just not first pressings. I think, like you said, they only did a short run on flat color, because my friend has an original pressed from New York in 1976, and it's 4-color, not Pantone.
That's confusing. Okay.
I looked it up on Discogs. Discogs is this database on the internet. It's for vinyl collectors.
What you're saying, Claudio, is that you think the printing that I went and supervised, the original one, they may have done a short run. Is that what
I
you're
don't
saying?
know. I have no idea how big that run was, but there are pressings pressed in New York from 1976. I don't know what month. Clearly, the first pressing is from the month the album was released, and then you have subsequent pressings once that original run,
All right, well,
runs out.
Yeah, it was obviously something done after me. That's all I can say. Yeah,
Probably, yeah. You were probably on to the
there's
next project.
nobody there to say, hey, let's do this the right way.
Well, like you said before, it was an expensive, more expensive,
Very
and more.
expensive. A 6-color press, which is not available to everybody, by the way. That's a special deal.
Yeah, but we also established that in order to get that today, Michael redid this in Illustrator. This is not based the reissue from 2014.
Yeah, because he didn't have his original stuff anymore.
Probably not, but still, he said, I'm sure, thinking like Michael is I can get a lot more quality from Illustrator than from my original ink drawing, which is true. I mean, there's no way you can compete with Illustrator, so he redid this in 2014.
I wish you could have seen those acetates that he prepared.
That would have been amazing.
I mean, it was superb.
I wonder where those are.
They should be in the files that
Kiss had,
took away from our office.
Yeah, for sure.
Sitting in a warehouse in a folder.
Probably. Yeah. All right. The other topic we were going to discuss in this session is the famous Gene's tweet about Superman and his pose on the cover of Destroyer. So I'm gonna show you that particular tweet so you can see it on your screen. All right, can you see it?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So what's Gene is saying basically in this tweet that the pose for his pose as a drawing, because it's not a photo of him, it's a drawing, that it was achieved through the sensibility of an artist, meaning he explained to Ken Kelly that he wanted a pose like Superman based on, the 1950s Superman. Is that accurate? Was that ever discussed while Gene, Ken, and you were in the same room, that he wanted his pose on the cover as Superman?
I never heard it, but I remember giving Ken instructions about how these guys should be posed when he did Destroyer, the very first incarnation, before he did anything. My first meeting with Ken, when I actually gave him the assignment.
So and that would be, and the result of that meeting, which was just you and Ken, would be the brown one.
That's right. And I stood on a chair or something, or I made Ken sit down while I stood up in front of him, and I went, I want him to be bigger than life. I don't know if I said superhero. I'm sure I said that before, but I want him to be larger than life. And I'm going like this. I'm going like this. I go, and they're big and they're there, and I'm gesturing. Ken might have extrapolated a Superman pose from what I'm trying to tell him, or Gene during the next meeting when they were describing costumes.
Let me stop you right there.
And so maybe Gene at that point.
But that doesn't make any sense, because the pose on the blue one is exactly
that's right.
the same.
It's the same.
It's
you're
exactly
right.
the same as the brown one. So
no, you're right.
Gene,
you're right. It's the
if
same.
Gene wasn't in the original meeting when you explained then it was not Gene's idea.
No, well, it couldn't have been.
It couldn't have been. I mean, he could only talk in that second meeting about the changing in the costumes, but not the poses. The poses are the same.
Yeah, you're right. I don't see how it could have been, Gene, because he had nothing to do with the creative meetings in the beginning. Nothing. I think he met Ken for the first time on that costume change meeting. Curious, huh? Curious.
Yeah.
Because that really is a Superman pose. But look, Ken Kelly is a student of comic books.
Right.
And if I said superhero or something, he might have just gone, click, Superman.
Right. And those poses weren't exclusive of Superman. If you go to Jack Kirby and a lot of the old guys, Dick Giordano and Dick Sprang. A lot of them would use the same poses. So there was a standard narrative in comic books at that time, you know.
So that's again another reason to believe that this just came out of Ken. Ken did it. Yeah.
I see. Well, we at least we established the timeline. The timeline is you hooked up with Ken first in the office. Explain to him what the painting was going to be, how the poses would be, how the angle of the viewpoint will be, and what is Kiss all about. And that meeting, which was again just you and Ken, resulted in the brown painting. Later on, you decided that the blue colors would be better. But at the same time this was happening, unbeknownst to you, there was the discussion at management that it was too violent and they wanted a second illustration. And that's what the blue painting came about. And for that meeting, Gene was present to discuss the costumes to Ken.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Yep. I just wanted to establish the timeline for Kiss fans, because a lot of people assume from this tweet by Gene that the poses were his idea and they were based on Superman, you know, and that discussion with those words never took place.
This is typical Gene. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know Gene, you could understand why he might say that.